I dress this way? A crazy drag queen, well perhaps you're gay. Is there a point to all these fancy clothes? With all these buckles from your head down to your toes? Very simple, but I'm just another girl. It's not so easy, but I'm giving it a whirl. Is there something that you're trying to prove? With all the makeup and the way you move, are you looking for some sympathy? No, I'm trying to be the best girl I can be. Very simple, but I'm just another girl. Not so easy, but I'm giving it a whirl. Like my martini's dry, cosmos I won't deny. Smoke those long cigarettes. Thank God I'm not dead yet. Done all these crazy things, short of a wedding ring. Just
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Calista Solon, and you're watching nlcTrans. Tonight I'm here with my dear friend and co-host, T.a.L.L. Sorry we're a couple minutes late, but we got here. Anyway, we were trying to put together B-roll for the show,
which we have.
Tara was, and we're going to have that for you in just a little bit. We've got some B-roll for you. In the meantime, we've got some things to talk about. And Tara's been playing with all sorts of contraptions over here. She's got her phone and her dock and all that good stuff. So I'm not sure exactly what we're doing, but I think we're trying to do some kind of a simulcast internet thing or something. I don't know.
For right now, you're always saying, I don't know how you can read that little tiny screen. Now I have a bigger screen.
Bigger screen, yeah.
And a mouse.
And a mouse for your phone, yes. Very cool.
And a mouse for my phone.
Very cool.
But yes, we're gonna try and take advantage of some of the new tech that got installed recently, so that we can do some more interactive stuff and potentially just make the show a little more interesting for anyone who happens to be tuning in.
Yeah.
And we are. You're right. We're also trying to. We need to get back on that.
The internet,
we had done a little bit of playing with Ustream on the phone to actually broadcast what's going on here in the studio live onto the internet for anyone outside of the MetroCast range, and we have to get back to trying some of that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. But yeah, you're absolutely. The studio just got upgraded to all new equipment. It's very neat. So happy. I think actually the picture's a little better now too. But I could be wrong.
Well, the signals go through a bunch of boxes in the back room, and when some of those get changed out, cleaner connections and stuff, sometimes it does make a big difference, although the cameras aren't changed out. We're not on new cameras yet.
But yeah. But anyway, so here we are, back with you again. Anyway, yeah, it's crazy out there. It's windy and cold and nasty, and I'm ready for spring. But the snow has been melting. We've only got a little bit left, which is kind of cool. I know some parts of the state they're still buried. But we're actually in pretty good shape there as long as we don't get any more storms. Although I think we're getting something Sunday, but I don't know.
There's supposed to be a couple of flurries tonight, and then something later in the week, much more substantial. But I just thought of another good reason. We're always printing out so much paper to cover stuff on the show. So this is my green.
Yeah, I've thought
alternative.
I know, and Stacy used to always bring her laptop, but she wasn't able to make it work for anything. But I've thought
with the cell phone. You have a cellular signal.
So yeah, it's cool. And I've thought about bringing my laptop just to save some of this paper too. Although
2 bars of 4G.
Okay.
4G networking.
Yeah. Cool. So I guess that's good.
That means I'm getting a pretty good signal here.
Yeah. So we'll be continuing to work on that in the future. It's going to be interesting. I know some people have actually asked about that. We managed to put 2-minute intros and stuff on there a little bit.
We were just testing, playing with it, seeing what we could do and how it turned out, and what we could do once the videos were up there, and how long they stay up there, and all that other fun stuff. So if it all works out, then yes, we'll have a little tripod set up, and
Yeah.
we'll stream the show on the internet at the same time.
Then people worldwide can watch, on the World Wide Web. Yeah, worldwide people can watch us.
And we just have to make sure we put a little overlay up with the phone numbers, which you can see here. So you can call into the show, and they could call into the show and comment or question or just say hi.
It's kind of cool. Don't know that anybody'd watch, but it's cool. The technology is neat. It really is. So anyway, happy. So hope you all had a nice Valentine's Day. And we just passed Groundhog Day too. The Groundhog saw a shadow.
Day.
Groundhog saw a shadow, didn't he? It figures.
She.
Oh, it's a she now.
I'm pretty sure it's a she.
Punxsutawney Phil died, and they had who's the new groundhog?
Punxsutawney Phil.
Oh, they're still named.
I think they're always named.
Oh, same name.
Like Lassie.
Oh, well, Lassie makes sense. Okay. It was different dogs.
It doesn't matter what the dog's name was. Its on-screen name was always Lassie.
Yeah, all right. That's just an actor, woodchuck, playing Punxsutawney Phil. All right, I'll stop. Anyway, there's always stuff going on. We're going to get some B-roll for you, and we're probably not going to have a whole lot of time here, but I just wanted to just talk quick about this one, because we've talked about popes before on this show historically.
Well, and very soon, Lily won't be able to say
that's
that
right.
The Pope's a Nazi.
Lily will have to stop saying that because we're going to have a new pope. Obviously, I'm sure you all know that the current pope is retiring, which is an unusual thing. Hasn't happened in a very, very long time.
Virtually unprecedented for somebody to retire when there's not more than one pope already around.
Yeah. So there will be a new pope, and I just picked this up off the Advocate tonight. This is, and I don't know who the new pope is going to be, but this is one of the possible candidates, I believe. And this was.
And if he gets the nod, then we'll be able to say the pope is something else.
Yeah, and this would be this is an interesting one because this is a cardinal, Catholic cardinal from Ghana, who is considered to be among the top candidates to become the next pope. Recently made statements linking homosexuality to the ongoing sex abuse scandal involving numerous Catholic priests. Ghanaian Cardinal Peter Turkson told a TV reporter that the priest sex abuse scandal was unlikely to impact Africa as harshly as it has Europe and North America because many African cultures are intolerant of homosexuality. This was reported by The Australian. African traditional systems kind of protect or have protected its population against this tendency, said Cardinal Turkson, who was 64 years old, who could become the first black pope, and that could be very interesting too.
Yes, actually,
that's kind of kind of cool, actually. But
then we just need a space pope.
Because in several communities and several cultures in Africa, homosexuality, or for that matter, any affair between two sexes of the same kind, are not countenanced. So that cultural taboo, that tradition, has been there. It has served to keep sex abuse out. Cardinal Turkson also defended Catholicism's ban on ordaining women, saying the exclusion is just how the Church has understood this order of ministry to be, according to The Australian. The Australian article quoted a Stonewall spokesman who said Cardinal Turkson's comments linking gays to pedophilia and sex abuse scandals within the Church shows a surprisingly callous disregard for the human rights of millions of people worldwide. An English bishop disagreed and told The Australian homosexuality is irrelevant to the child abuse problem, noting that English priests have been very careful in this country to keep the two issues well apart. Indeed, research indicates that gay people are no more likely to sexually abuse minors than are straight people, and that most pedophiles self-identify as heterosexual. It's something we talked about before, which is why I grabbed this when I saw it. Was sort of that notion that that it had something to do with homosexuality, and it doesn't.
No,
It has to do with pedophilia, which...
Well, and not even. In most cases, sexual assault of any kind is an act of power, not an act of sexuality.
Yeah. But it's not. The act is a pedophilic act, not a homosexual act.
Right. It may be both.
Well, it could be both, but the point being that that the homosexuality probably has very little to do with it.
Right.
And I've heard that before. That sort of, you know, we're going to blame the sex child abuse priest scandal thing on homosexuality. It's like, no.
Well, and it's also difficult because when you do that, you immediately eliminate and ignore all the girls that are abused by priests.
Yeah.
You know, yes, there's a predominance of boys, but primarily because most of the Catholic and Christian faiths, you know, don't have altar girls.
Yeah.
But there are girls in the religious community, and they do get abused by these
absolutely
people as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's kind of hard to make the argument when an adult male is taking advantage of a young female that it's an act of homosexuality.
Yeah. So anyway, that was interesting, but it's kind of an interesting thing. You know, the first black pope, that could be very cool, but we sort of need to educate him a little bit on that whole. certainly, and he's from Ghana. Certainly, you know, you're talking about the Africa and the way homosexuals are treated in Africa. You know, in some places in Africa certainly is it's pretty horrible. So it's a whole human rights issue on its own. That, you know, some of the stuff that's going on down there. But anyway, so in keeping with our tradition of reporting on what the popes are up
doing.
we were going to do. There was a time we were going to do a parody of the Count the Popes and the Pizza Contest. I don't know if any of you remember the old original Saturday night. It was, I think, from the first season probably of Saturday Night Live, and Father Guido Sarducci did a contest, count the popes and the pizza. You could win prizes by counting all the popes, the faces of the popes that were hidden in the pizza.
The pepperoni popes,
sort of like Finding Waldo or whatever. But it was popes and the pizza. It was cute. Anyway, that was a long time ago, but. Don't know whatever happened to Father Guido, but anyway, here's another interesting thing that I saw.
Oh, okay, you've got that too.
Oh, did you have this?
No, not anymore.
Okay, this was something I also picked up from the Advocate, and it was about supporting marriage equality and some of the people that are supporting it. And interestingly, Dick Cheney and Colin Powell were among them.
And Laura Bush.
And Laura Bush, yeah.
There's a group that got started, the Respect for Marriage Coalition.
Yep, right.
That a lot of times the names are a little misleading. So, you know, the Defense of Marriage Coalition is actually only interested in defending marriage between a man and a woman. So the Respect for Marriage Coalition is the equivalent that's out to fight for marriage equality. And they spent $1 million on an ad campaign that includes this video, which if I had seen it an hour ago, we'd have for you. But
yeah, and maybe we can get that for you next week or something.
And among the celebrities that it features are President Obama and former First Lady Laura Bush, Colin Powell, and Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's see, that's one, depending on how you view his politics, Democrat, socialist, communist, fascist, whatever, and 3 Republicans.
Yeah. Kind of interesting, but yeah. Anyway, so I saw that and was kind of pleased by that.
Yeah, that's really nice.
You know, that very cool. Anyway, did you have something there you wanted to talk about?
It's tougher for you to tell now, isn't it?
It is. Well, yeah, I can't tell what you've got on your screen, so.
I've got a bunch of tabs open. Some of them related to this, some of them in preparation for.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So an interesting tidbit. The first recorded baby born in France in 2013 is born to two mothers.
Really?
A woman in Moulins, France, tongue-tied tonight, named Maud, is the biological mother to newborn Sasha and has sole legal rights over the child. Maud and her partner, Delphine, had to go to a sperm bank in Belgium in order to become pregnant because gay couples are not allowed to do so in France.
Really?
Yes, she says, we were very lucky because we only had one insemination, which worked right away, so everyone was ready to start our little family.
Yeah, that's amazing. It seems like it should be an easy thing to find sperm donors. I'm kidding. but no, go on.
The women say they wish to wed if the French Parliament approves a marriage equality bill, which the government is currently debating. In less happy news, a 23-year-old gay man and his boyfriend were physically and verbally assaulted on a New York subway Monday night.
I saw that. Nobody helped.
And nobody helped. On the number 2 train, when they say a woman began taking pictures of them, leading to a confrontation. When one of the men asked the woman why she was taking pictures of him eating food on the train, the woman allegedly responded by shouting, "Feed your face, faggot."
Wow.
And the Daily News reports that another woman chimed in, apparently asking the man's partner, "Why are you with that faggot?" An argument ensued, and the women were joined by 3 others and a man, so that's 6, who all attacked this gay man, according to police. When his partner attempted to intervene, he was repeatedly punched. They were treated at St. Luke's Hospital for a left eye swollen shut with a cut above the socket. They managed to get off the train at the next stop and called police, who are investigating the incident as a possible hate crime. His partner said to the Daily News, "Everyone was watching and no one helped. That was a very scary situation." And it's because of that sentiment that I wanted to make sure I mentioned it.
Yeah.
That I know some of these, what's the show, What Would You Do? Has done some stuff with same-sex parents in New York and in Texas. It's all staged, and except for the bystanders that are watching. And the folks in Texas were actually much more active in getting into the conversations and defending the same-sex parents from a supposed attack by a diner waitress who was hurling slurs. In New York, only like 2 or 3 out of 100 times that they did this, did anybody in the restaurant actually step up and try and help, try and stop the waiter in that case from insulting these parents in front of their kids. And the difference seemed to be that in Texas they felt much more of a sense of community. These are saying, these people live around here, they're part of our community, we're not going to let anyone treat members of our community that way, meaning geographic community. Right. And in New York, people seem to have the attitude that, well, I didn't like what I was hearing, but it's not my place to get involved. And so that was interesting. And maybe this is an element of that, but when you start to see physical violence ensue, it's hard to start to make excuses. It really is. We do have 26 minutes of B-roll, but I want to go through one thing quickly, and then I'll give you the background on the B-roll. This is from yesterday. Mexican court uses American legal precedent, you saw that, for marriage equality. After Mexico's Supreme Court ruled that the state of Oaxaca's ban on marriage rights for same-sex couples was unconstitutional last December, the court has now released its official ruling. the court ruled unanimously using the American legal cases of Loving v. Virginia and Brown v. Board of Education to argue for equality. Quote, "It can be said that other models for recognition of same-sex couples, even if the only difference with marriage be the name given to both types of institutions, are inherently discriminatory." Just pulled something. Excuse me. Are inherently discriminatory because they constitute a regime of separate but equal, like racial segregation found on the unacceptable. Like racial segregation founded on the unacceptable idea of white supremacy. The exclusion of homosexual couples from marriage also is based on a prejudice that historically has existed against homosexuals. Their exclusion from the institution of marriage perpetuates the notion that same-sex couples are less worthy of recognition than heterosexual couples, offending their dignity as people. This is what the Mexican government is ruling on marriage equality.
Wow.
That in this case, making both sides of the argument, recognizing in this case that heterosexuals have historically been excluded from marriage, and then turning around and saying it wasn't right then and it's not right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mexico very easily found marriage equality to be the road to hoe, based on U.S. precedent.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
But the U.S. is having a hard time coming to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Although increasingly the country's there, even if our laws aren't there.
Yeah, yeah.
So tonight's B-rolls are about technology, getting back to why we started doing some of it, and internet security. As everyone out there is probably aware, don't click on emails that you get from people you don't know. Don't open attachments. Don't follow links. In the news this week, a company called Mandiant, who I've had dealings with where I work, released a report, which they do regularly, that they also, the New York Times, I think it was, ran a story on, about some of the hacking incidences that Mandiant is a security company. They have a bunch of people pay them money. They have customers, and they go in to do computer forensics when there's been a breach or an attempted breach. And they have designated that there's an advanced persistent threat from an organization in China. This is what's in the news this week. Evidence linking the advanced persistent threat, number 1, meaning it's the first one they're naming, not that it's the highest, to China's 2nd Bureau of the People's Liberation Army General Staff Department, 3rd Department, Military Designator 61398. They've established a timeline of this group, their economic espionage conducted since 2006 against 141 victim companies. They attack. In a nutshell, there's more than 3,000 indicators that they've used to trace back attacks on infrastructure companies, so you're talking about power, light, utilities, the defense industrial base companies, all of our defense contractors, and some of their other clients that all go back to this one building in Shanghai, this multi-story building in Shanghai. This is not the only thing that they're tracking, but since they've had such a concerted effort from this one building, this one site, they seem to have evidence that they've broken them up into teams to target different areas, and it's very interesting. So we're going to run the B-roll and let you see what we've got. It's not about this specifically, but in general.
The idea behind the Stuxnet computer worm is actually quite simple. We don't want Iran to get the bomb. Their major asset for developing nuclear weapons is the Natanz uranium enrichment facility. The gray boxes that you see, these are real-time control systems. Now, if we manage to compromise these systems that control drive speeds and valves, we can actually cause a lot of problem with these centrifuges. The gray boxes don't run Windows software. They're completely different technology. But if we manage to place a good Windows virus on a notebook that is used by a maintenance engineer to configure this gray box, then we are in business. And this is the plot behind Stuxnet. So we start with a Windows dropper. The payload goes on to the gray box, then the centrifuge, and the Iranian nuclear program is delayed. Mission accomplished. That's easy, huh? I want to tell you how we found that out. When we started our research on Stuxnet 6 months ago, it was completely unknown what the purpose of this thing was. The only thing that was known is it's very, very complex. On the Windows part, the dropper part uses multiple zero-day vulnerabilities, and it seemed to want to do something with these gray boxes, these real-time control systems. So that got our attention, and we started a lab project where we infected our environment with Stuxnet and checked this thing out. And then some very funny things happened. Stuxnet behaved like a lab rat that didn't like our cheese. Sniffed but didn't want to eat. Didn't make sense to me. And after we experimented with different flavors of cheese, I realized, well, this is a directed attack. It's completely directed. The dropper is probing actively on the gray box if a specific configuration is found, and even if the actual program code that is trying to infect is actually running on that target. And if not, Stuxnet does nothing. So that really got my attention, and we started to work on this nearly round the clock, because I thought, well, we don't know what the target is. It could be, let's say, for example, a US power plant or a chemical plant in Germany. So we better find out what the target is soon. So we extracted and decompiled the attack code, and we discovered that it's structured in 2 digital bombs, a smaller one and a bigger one. And what we also saw that they are very professionally engineered by people who obviously had all insider information. They knew all the bits and bytes that they had to attack. They probably even know the shoe size of the operator, so they know everything. And if you have heard that the dropper of Stuxnet is complex and high-tech, let me tell you this. The payload is rocket science. It's way above everything that we have ever seen before. Here you see a sample of this actual attack code. We are talking about around about 15,000 lines of code. Looks pretty much like old-style assembly language. And I want to tell you how we were able to make sense out of this code. So what we are looking for is, first of all, system function calls, because we know what they do. And then we are looking for timers and data structures and try to relate them to the real world, to potential real world targets. So we do need target theories that we can prove or disprove. In order to get target theories, we remember that it's definitely hardcore sabotage, it must be a high-value target, and it is most likely located in Iran, because that's where most of the infections had been reported. Now, you don't find several thousand targets in that area. It basically boils down to the Bushehr nuclear power plant and to the Natanz fuel enrichment plant. So I told my assistant, get me a list of our centrifuge and power plant experts from our client base, and I phoned them up and picked their brain in an effort to match their expertise with what we found in code and data. And that worked pretty well. So we were able to associate the small digital warhead with the rotor control. The rotor is that moving part within the centrifuge, that black object that you see. And if you manipulate the speed of this rotor, you were actually able to crack the rotor and eventually even have the centrifuge explode. What we also saw is that the goal of the attack was really to do it slowly and creepy, obviously in an effort to drive maintenance engineers crazy, that they would not be able to figure this out quickly. The big digital warhead, we had a shot at this by looking very closely at data and data structures. So for example, the number 164 really stands out in that code. You can't overlook it. I started to research scientific literature on how these centrifuges are actually built in the TANs and found, well, they are structured in what is called a cascade, and each cascade holds 164 centrifuges. So that made sense. That was a match. And it even got better. These centrifuges in Iran are subdivided in 15 what is called stages. And guess what we found in the attack code? An almost identical structure. So again, that was a real good match, and this gave us very high confidence what we were looking at. Now, don't get me wrong here, it didn't went like this. So these results have been obtained over several weeks of really hard labor, and we often went just into a dead end and had to recover. Anyway, so we figured out that both digital warheads were actually aiming at one and the same target, but from different angles. The small warhead is attacking one cascade and spinning up the rollers and slowing them down, and the big warhead is talking to 6 cascades and manipulating valves. So now we are very confident that we have actually determined what the target is. It is Natanz, and it is only Natanz, so we don't have to worry that other targets might be hit by Stuxnet. Here's some very cool stuff that we saw. Really knocked my socks off. Down there is the gray box, and on the top you see these centrifuges. Now what this thing does is it intercepts the input values from sensors. So for example, from pressure sensors and vibration sensors. And it provides the legitimate program code, which is still running during the attack, with fake input data. And as a matter of fact, this fake input data is actually pre-recorded by Stuxnet. So it's just like, you know, from the Hollywood movies, where during the heist, the observation camera is fed with pre-recorded video. That's cool, huh? The idea here is obviously not only to fool the operators in the control room. It actually is much more dangerous and aggressive. The idea here is to circumvent a digital safety system. We need digital safety systems where a human operator could not act quick enough. So for example, in a power plant, when your big steam turbine gets to overspeed, you must open relief valves within a millisecond. Obviously, this cannot be done by a human operator. So this is where we need digital safety systems. And when they are compromised, then real bad things can happen. Your plant can blow up, and neither your operators nor your safety system will notice it. That's scary. But it gets worse. And this is very important, what I'm going to say. Think about this. This attack is generic. It doesn't have anything to do in specifics with centrifuges, with uranium enrichment. So it would work as well, for example, in a power plant or in an automobile factory. It is generic. And you don't have, as an attacker, you don't have to deliver this payload via a USB stick, as we saw it in the case of Stuxnet. You could also use conventional worm technology for spreading. Just spread it as wide as possible. And if you do that, what you end up is it's a cyber weapon of mass destruction. That's the consequence that we have to face. So, unfortunately, the biggest number of targets for such attacks are not in the Middle East. They're in the United States, in Europe, and in Japan. So all the green areas, these are your target-rich environments. We have to face the consequences, and we better start to prepare right now. Thanks.
I'm a computer science professor, and my area of expertise is computer and information security. When I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity to overhear my grandmother describing to one of her fellow senior citizens what I did for a living. Apparently, I was in charge of making sure that no one stole the computers from the university. And, you know, that's a perfectly reasonable thing for her to think, because I told her I was working in computer security. And it was interesting to get her perspective. But that's not the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard anyone say about my work. The most ridiculous thing I ever heard is I was at a dinner party, and a woman heard that I work in computer security, and she asked me if, she said her computer had been infected by a virus, and she was very concerned that she might get sick from it, that she could get this virus. And I'm not a doctor, but I reassured her that it was very, very unlikely that this would happen. But if she felt more comfortable, she could be free to use latex gloves when she was on the computer, and there'd be no harm whatsoever in that. I'm going to get back to this notion of being able to get a virus from your computer in a serious way. What I'm going to talk to you about today are some hacks, some real-world cyber attacks that people in my community, the academic research community, have performed, which I don't think most people know about, and I think they're very interesting and scary. And this talk is kind of a greatest hits of the academic security community's hacks. None of the work is my work. It's all work that my colleagues have done, and I actually asked them for their slides and incorporated them into this talk. So the first one I'm going to talk about are implanted medical devices. Now, medical devices have come a long way technologically. You can see in 1926, the first pacemaker was invented. In 1960, the first internal pacemaker was implanted, hopefully a little smaller than that one that you see there. And technology has continued to move forward. In 2006, we hit an important milestone from the perspective of computer security. And why do I say that? Because that's when implanted devices inside of people started to have networking capabilities. One thing that brings us close to home is we look at Dick Cheney's device. He had a device that pumped blood from an aorta to another part of the heart, and as you can see at the bottom there, it was controlled by a computer controller. And if you ever thought that software reliability was very important, get one of these inside of you. Now, what a research team did was they got their hands on what's called an ICD. This is a defibrillator, and this is a device that goes into a person to control their heart rhythm. And these have saved many lives. Well, in order to not have to open up the person every time you want to reprogram their device or do some diagnostics on it, they made the thing be able to communicate wirelessly. And what this research team did is they reverse engineered the wireless protocol, and they built the device you see pictured here with a little antenna that could talk the protocol to the device and thus control it. In order to make their experiments real, they were unable to find any volunteers, and so they went and they got some ground beef and some bacon, and they wrapped it all up to about the size of a human being's area where the device would go, and they stuck the device inside it to perform their experiments somewhat realistically. They launched many, many successful attacks. One that I'll highlight here is changing the patient's name. I don't know why you would want to do that, but I sure wouldn't want that done to me. And they were able to change therapies, including disabling the device. And this is with a real commercial off-the-shelf device, simply by performing reverse engineering and sending wireless signals to it. There was a piece on NPR that some of these ICDs could actually have their performance disrupted simply by holding a pair of headphones onto them. Now, wireless and the internet can improve healthcare greatly. There are several examples up on the screen of situations where doctors are looking to implant devices inside of people. And all of these devices now, it's standard that they communicate wirelessly. And I think this is great, but without a full understanding of trustworthy computing and without understanding what attackers can do and the security risks from the beginning, there's a lot of danger in this. Okay, let me shift gears and show you another target. I'm going to show you a few different targets like this, and that's my talk. So we'll look at automobiles. This is a car, and it has a lot of components, a lot of electronics in it today. In fact, it's got many, many different computers inside of it, more Pentiums than my lab did when I was in college. And they're connected by a wired network. There's also a wireless network in the car, which can be reached from many different ways. So there's Bluetooth, there's the FM and XM radio, there's actually Wi-Fi, there are sensors in the wheels that wirelessly communicate the tire pressure to a controller on board. The modern car is a sophisticated multi-computer device. And what happens if somebody wanted to attack this? Well, that's what the researchers that I'm going to talk about today did. they basically stuck an attacker on the wired network and on the wireless network. Now, they have two areas they can attack. One is short-range wireless, where you can actually communicate with the device from nearby, either through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. And the other is long-range, where you can communicate with the car through the cellular network or through one of the radio stations. Think about it, when a car receives a radio signal, it's processed by software. That software has to receive and decode the radio signal and then figure out what to do with it, even if it's just music that it needs to play on the radio. And that software that does that decoding, if it has any bugs in it, could create a vulnerability for somebody to hack the car. The way that the researchers did this work is they read the software in the computer chips that were in the car, and then they used sophisticated reverse engineering tools to figure out what that software did, and then they found vulnerabilities in that software, and then they built exploits to exploit those. They actually carried out their attack in real life. They bought 2 cars, and I guess they have better budgets than I do. The first threat model was to see what someone could do if an attacker actually got access to the internal network on the car. Okay, so think of that as someone gets to go to your car, they get to mess around with it, and then they leave, and now what kind of trouble are you in? The other threat model is that they contact you in real time over one of the wireless networks like the cellular or something like that, never having actually gotten physical access to your car. This is what their setup looks like for the first model, where you get to have access to the car. They put a laptop and they connect it to the diagnostic unit on the in-car network. And they did all kinds of silly things, like here's a picture of the speedometer showing 140 miles an hour when the car's in park. Once you have control of the car's computers, you can do anything. Now you might say, okay, that's silly. Well, what if you make the car always say it's going 20 miles an hour slower than it's actually going? You might produce a lot of speeding tickets. Then they went out to an abandoned airstrip with 2 cars, the target victim car and the chase car, and they launched a bunch of other attacks. One of the things they were able to do from the chase car is apply the brakes on the other car, simply by hacking the computer. They were able to disable the brakes. They also were able to install malware that wouldn't kick in and wouldn't trigger until the car was doing something like going over 20 miles an hour or something like that. The results are astonishing, and when they gave this talk, even though they gave this talk at a conference to a bunch of computer security researchers, everybody was gasping. They were able to take over a bunch of critical computers inside the car, the brakes computer, the lighting computer, the engine, the dash, the radio, etc. And they were able to perform these on real commercial cars that they purchased using the radio network. They were able to compromise every single one of the pieces of software that controlled every single one of the wireless capabilities of the car. All of these were implemented successfully. How would you steal a car in this model? Well, you compromise the car by a buffer overflow vulnerability in the software, something like that. You use the GPS in the car to locate it. You remotely unlock the doors through the computer that controls that, start the engine, bypass anti-theft, and you've got yourself a car. Surveillance was really interesting. The authors of the study have a video where they show themselves taking over a car and then turning on the microphone in the car and listening in on the car while tracking it via a GPS on a map. And so that's something that the drivers of the car would never know was happening. Am I scaring you yet? Got a few more of these interesting ones. These are ones where I went to a conference and my mind was just blown, and I said, I have to share this with other people. This was Fabian Monrose's lab at the University of North Carolina. And what they did was something intuitive once you see it, but kind of surprising. They videotaped people on a bus, and then they post-processed the video. What you see here in number 1 is a reflection in somebody's glasses of the smartphone that they're typing in. They wrote software to stabilize, even though they were on a bus and maybe someone's holding their phone at an angle, to stabilize the phone, process it, and you may know on your smartphone when you type a password, the keys pop out a little bit, and they were able to use that to reconstruct what the person was typing and had a language model for detecting typing. What was interesting is by videotaping on a bus, they were able to produce exactly what people on their smartphones were typing. And then they had a surprising result, which is that their software had not only done it for their target, but other people who accidentally happened to be in the picture, they were able to produce what those people had been typing. And that was kind of an accidental artifact of what their software was doing. I'll show you 2 more. One is P25 radios. P25 radios are used by law enforcement and all kinds of government agencies and people in combat to communicate, and there's an encryption option on these phones. This is what the phone looks like. It's not really a phone, it's more of a two-way radio. Motorola makes the most widely used one, and you can see that they're used by Secret Service, they're used in combat. It's a very, very common standard in the US and elsewhere. So one question the researchers asked themselves is, could you block this thing, right? Could you run a denial of service? Because these are first responders. So would a terrorist organization want to black out the ability of police and fire to communicate at an emergency? They found that there's this GirlTech device used for texting that happens to operate at the same exact frequency as the P25, and they built what they called My First Jammer. If you look closely at this device, it's got a switch for encryption or clear text. Let me advance the slide. And now I'll go back. You see the difference? This is plain text. This is encrypted. There's one little dot that shows up on the screen and one little tiny turn of the switch. And so the researchers asked themselves, I wonder how many times very secure, important, sensitive conversations are happening on these two-way radios where they forget to encrypt and they don't notice that they didn't encrypt. So they bought a scanner. These are perfectly legal, and they run at the frequency of the P25. And what they did is they hopped around frequencies, and they wrote software to listen in. If they found encrypted communication, they stayed on that channel, and they wrote down that's a channel that these people communicate in, these law enforcement agencies. And they went to 20 metropolitan areas and listened in on conversations that were happening at those frequencies. They found that in every metropolitan area, they would capture over 20 minutes a day of clear text communication. And what kind of things were people talking about? Well, they found the names and information about confidential informants. They found information that was being recorded in wiretaps, a bunch of crimes that were being discussed, sensitive information. It was mostly law enforcement and criminal. They went and reported this to the law enforcement agencies after anonymizing it, and the vulnerability here is simply the user interface wasn't good enough. If you're talking about something really secure and sensitive, it should be really clear to you that this conversation is encrypted. That one's pretty easy to fix. The last one I thought was really, really cool, and I just had to show it to you. It's probably not something that you're going to lose sleep over, like the cars or the defibrillators, but it's stealing keystrokes. Now, we've all looked at smartphones upside down. Every security expert wants to hack a smartphone. And we tend to look at the USB port, the GPS for tracking, the camera, the microphone. But no one up till this point had looked at the accelerometer. The accelerometer is the thing that determines the vertical orientation of the smartphone. And so they had a simple setup. They put a smartphone next to a keyboard, and they had people type. And then their goal was to use the vibrations that were created by typing to measure the change in the accelerometer reading to determine what the person had been typing. Now, when they tried this on an iPhone 3GS, this is a graph of the perturbations that were created by the typing. And you can see that it's very difficult to tell when somebody was typing or what they were typing. But the iPhone 4 greatly improved the accelerometer. And so the same measurement produced this graph. Now, that gave you a lot of information while someone was typing. And what they did then is used advanced artificial intelligence techniques called machine learning to have a training phase. And so they got, most likely, grad students to type in a whole lot of things and to learn, to have the system use the machine learning tools that were available to learn what it is that the people were typing and to match that up with the measurements in the accelerometer. And then there's the attack phase where you get somebody to type something in, you don't know what it was, but you use your model that you created in the training phase to figure out what they were typing. They had pretty good success. This is an article from the USA Today. They typed in, the Illinois Supreme Court has ruled that Rahm Emanuel is eligible to run for mayor of Chicago. See, I tied into the last talk. And ordered him to stay on the ballot. Now, the system is interesting because it produced Illinois Supreme, and then it wasn't sure. The model produced a bunch of options. And this is the beauty of some of the AI techniques, is that computers are good at some things, humans are good at other things. Take the best of both. Let the human solve this one. Don't waste computer cycles. A human's not going to think it's the supreme might. It's the Supreme Court, right? And so together, we're able to reproduce typing simply by measuring the accelerometer. Why does this matter? Well, in the Android platform, for example, the developers have a manifest where every device on there, the microphone, etc., has to register if you're going to use it so that hackers can't take over it. But nobody controls the accelerometer. So what's the point? You can leave your iPhone next to someone's keyboard and just leave the room and then later recover what they did even without using the microphone. If someone is able to put malware on your iPhone, they could then maybe get the typing that you do whenever you put your iPhone next to your keyboard. There's several other notable attacks that unfortunately I don't have time to go into, but the one that I wanted to point out was a group from the University of Michigan which was able to take voting machines, the Sequoia AVC Edge DREs that were going to be used in New Jersey in the election that were left in a hallway, and put Pac-Man on it. So they ran the Pac-Man game. What does this all mean? Well, I think that society tends to adopt technology really quickly. I love the next coolest gadget. But it's very important, and these researchers are showing, that the developers of these things need to take security into account from the very beginning and need to realize that they may have a threat model, but the attackers may not be nice enough to limit themselves to that threat model. And so you need to think outside of the box. What we can do is be aware that devices can be compromised, and anything that has software in it is going to be vulnerable. It's going to have bugs. Thank you very much.
Well, welcome back. We've still got some. Yeah. Anyway, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that.
And we'll talk more about it next week.
We're out of time. We're out of time, so we just have enough time to say goodnight. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.